now we want to talk about Balkanization of the media sphere in Eastern Central Europe, which is a huge issue right now, but also about very interesting survey that we came across. And it breaks down to just really simple thing that despite that we thought that Russian propaganda waged on the region should convince as much people as possible of that kind of narrative, it goes for a bit different result, and people are not being convinced, but at the same time, the voter polarization is rising. And that's what we're going to talk right now with our guest.
That's right. So with us, we have Leonid Peisakhin. Did I say that right?
That was correct,
okay,
yeah.
Great. Who is an assistant professor of politics at the New York University campus in Abu Dhabi. So welcome to Kyiv.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, tell us a little bit. You just finished a big research project about what the impact of Russian media was on different sort of voting groups in different areas. And what you found, from what I understand, is that it wasn't so much that Russian media was able to persuade new viewers or readers, but that it would sort of entrench those who already had those beliefs into their own camps. Is that, did I get that right?
That's exactly right, yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about, kind of elaborate, if you would, on that.
So what's very interesting, I think, about existing research about media persuasion in the context of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the studies that have been done here in Ukraine, certainly over the past couple of months, is that it's very common to claim that if an individual watches Russian media, Russian television, he or she is going to be inevitably persuaded by it and then take a pro-Russian position. Mm-hmm. And it's taken almost for granted that if a viewer watches Russian television, they are going to become increasingly pro-Russian. Mm-hmm. What we find is that that's not actually the case. And, in many ways, it's very intuitive, if you like, because obviously there are different types of voters out there. Some voters are by their nature pro-Russian, more likely to take a pro-Russian view for whatever reason. They might speak Russian language, or they might have relatives in Russia, whatever reason it is. And other viewers are more likely to take a pro-Ukrainian, pro-European position. And those two different groups of viewers react to Russian media in very different ways. And in many ways, it's very intuitive if you think about it.
It's sort of like preaching to the choir.
Absolutely. That's what's happening. And what's increasingly happening then is that as the choir is exposed to the political message, the choir is becoming increasingly polarized, because those who are already by their nature pro-Russian become more pro-Russian as a result of exposure to Russian media. Those who are already pro-Western, pro-Ukrainian become more pro-Western as a result of exposure to the same media source.
So given this study and given this sort of change, I mean, like you said, most of us, I think, believe, like, oh, if you watch that, RT all day, you'll end up being completely brainwashed or become very pro-Russia. What does this mean for what's happening with the information warfare in this current conflict?
Well, I think what it means is that one has to think twice about how to counteract Russian propaganda. Simply for very practical reasons, if one is working for Ukrainian media, especially Ukrainian state-controlled or state-affiliated media, one very carefully what kind of message one wants to be putting out there. Should one be trying to counter every single thing that is said on Russian television? And by the way, this is a question that applies not only just to Ukrainian media, of course, but to international media broadly. There are now initiatives both at the level of the European Union and in the United States to set up channels to very explicitly counter what is perceived by many to be Russian propaganda. What we the implication of our study is that perhaps objectively covering the news is better than attempting to counter every single message that is put out by Russian media. In many ways, Russian media is hurting, the audience that is trying to influence. It's hurting itself, its own mission, because it's not necessarily persuading people. It might be dissuading certain types of already by their nature.
And if you have polarization, and this is something already from psychology, if you have polarization of voters and they kind of really angry at each other, but then you go straight to fatigue when people are kind of tired of constantly fighting with each other, and then the whole narrative of aggressive propaganda starts falling apart, right?
Well, so this is a very interesting idea. So what is the, why is Russia investing? Why does Russia keep investing, a lot of resources resources into this effort if in many ways it's counterproductive. And I'm sure that, well, I don't know, but my guess would be that people in the Kremlin and in Moscow realize that in principle their media is not persuading every single individual who is exposed to it. In fact, many are being dissuaded. Why do they keep investing money in this? And one of the possible answers, I suppose, is that maybe Russia benefits in some way from polarization. Polarization leads to, a society that's more divided, a society that's more likely to enter into conflict. And perhaps that is something that might be considered to be beneficial.
Maybe it's a lesson to learn for the Ukrainian government that tries to set up kind of its own propaganda machine with state-sponsored Ministry of Information, and then setting up new state-owned news channel in English, which is basically, despite that they're telling us that they want to push only truth, but basically they're pushing propaganda too, because they think that if you talk in private with them, they think that the best answer is try to push for another set of propaganda.
And in many ways, this is a classical Ukrainian political story. You look at everything that Russia does, and you take that and you respond to that by countering every. And it's a terrible mistake in many ways, not everything in politics, and Ukrainian politics has to be so directly connected to, attempting to respond to Russia's initiatives. And, the implication of our study again is that objective coverage of news, reporting things as they really are on the ground, without an attempt to persuade people by using loaded terms, for example, classic, because it's terrorists versus separatists, etc. Maybe that's going to have greater effect on persuading people to actually take a pro-government position than attempting to very directly counter every single thing that's put out on Russian television.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.